I want to give a quick overview of the on-farm research efforts that we've got going on in Ohio. So the first thing we did 2 years ago, we sat down and we tried to better understand what we had going on across the state and what needs we saw. So Ohio State has always had agricultural research going on across the state. We have 11 research centers that are around the state. It's hard to see on here, but the little white numbers on that map. Of those 11, 3 of them are focused on row crop production. And so they're pretty well distributed. You can't use a pointer at the TV. So Northwest Ohio and then Western Ohio there in Clark County, that covers pretty well the western half of the state where the bulk of our ag production is occurring. And then there's one up there at Worcester on the eastern half of the state. But one of the things that we've heard from you over and over again is that this on-farm research, or the research that's going on at Ohio State is great, but it's really far away from my farm. Those sites don't look like my farm, and that research, those research results might not be applicable to your operation. And so we wanted to see how we can do a better job of serving those needs and addressing those concerns. And so Ohio State Extension has always been doing on-farm research around the state. There have been over 500 research reports published since 1997. And those are available. You can download them and read them at the Ag Crops website. But some of the complaints, again, that we've heard from you about those reports is that they're very academic. They're hard to digest, hard to take that information and turn it into a decision on your farm. And I'm not going to lie, we are slow when it comes to getting those out. They're peer-reviewed, which we do that to maintain the high quality of the research. But sometimes that takes us a year or two to get those released by the time we go through that whole process. And we know that's just simply not fast enough for the timeline that you guys are working on. Another concern is that a lot of times we do those protocols, by the time they get published, no one's interested in repeating them again, and so they're a one-off, and you don't see that research repeated again over different locations and over time. So those were the 3 concerns that we wanted to address with our on-farm research program. And then when we look to the future, we see that technology is really moving quickly. It seems like by the time we get ag research out about a new technology, there are 3 new things that have come in that now it's going to take us another 5 years to let you know how they really work, right? We've been seeing, you guys all know this, an increased volatility in our weather patterns. We've seen a lot more wet years. We've seen recently a few dry years, but it doesn't seem like very many. And so I think we need to better understand how to adapt our management practices to these ever-changing conditions. And then the next thing that I see as a big need moving forward is, how many of you guys think you might be retiring from farming in the next 10 years? Yeah, a good chunk of the room. And so some of these younger guys maybe haven't had the opportunity to take the reins and make decisions and understand that whole process. And I think, I'm going to pop up this next slide here. I think on-farm research is a tool that we can use to address all of those concerns that I just discussed. Our goal with our Ohio State on-farm research program that we've started now is to get those results to you quickly, have those projects represented more broadly across the state, and then use that information to help you better customize management recommendations, how to be more specific on what you can do on your farm to address certain needs. And so this is a word cloud. And the way these work, if you're not familiar, this was from a survey that we did of extension educators asking them why they think on-farm research benefits them and farmers. And how this works is I take all the text responses from that and I plug it into the software, and the bigger the word is, that's the more times it was used. So this gives us an idea of words that are used repeatedly when we ask them about on-farm research. And what we see very quickly, those top benefits that they're identifying for on-farm research are the relationships that we're building with farmers across the state. And slightly smaller, you see in there that there are local agronomic results that you can use and knowledge that you can use to improve your decision making. So this is why we think on-farm research should be a critical piece moving forward in the state. So that gets us to eFields. What is eFields? So eFields is our on-farm research network that we're developing at Ohio State. It started in 2017, was the first year that we started rolling this out on farms. And we identified 3 key goals that we want to achieve with this program. and that's to do a better job of working the university with industry to help drive innovation forward that benefits farmers. The second piece is to do a better job of partnering with you to make sure that we're translating research and information to your farm instead of just giving you recommendations for an average across the whole state. And then the third piece is to deliver this information, the results of these on-farm trials, to you in a timely manner so that you can use this information in real time to make decisions on your farm. And so over the next couple of slides, I want to step through what we're doing today at Ohio State to achieve those three goals. And the first is we're working to build partnerships with different groups in industry to better serve you. And there's a lot up here, but I want to point out a couple. The first, we've got some different technologies that companies that provide technology that you may be familiar with. Precision planting is one. I'm not picking favorites off of here, but they have some cool, innovative tools that we want to see how they perform in the field. One that I like is a little bit more out of the box is crop metrics. So they develop sensors for helping schedule irrigation events, and they're pretty popular out west. So we've got those sorts of sensors in two different scenarios. The first, there's very little, but there is in fact some irrigated fields in Ohio. And we are looking at helping those farmers use these sensors to improve their scheduling of their irrigator. But we're also taking these sensors and putting them into a more out-of-the-box type of trial, a nitrogen trial, to try to track how we know that soil moisture plays a critical role in the way that that crop can take up and use that nitrogen. So we're using those sensors to monitor that soil moisture throughout the season to see if that helps explain some of the results we're seeing in these trials and also help us plan in the future of how to do a better job of managing that nitrogen. So those are just two quick examples of how we're leveraging these industry partnerships to help benefit you. So the second and most critical piece is partnering with farmers. And so the way we've gone about this is through these on-farm field scale trials. And we've worked with state specialists and extension educators to develop some protocols to get started. The three that we have currently today are corn and soybean seeding rate, and then also nitrogen rate, but we're working on a few others that I'll talk about in a few moments. And probably the most critical piece is we don't want to just come up with trials out of our own minds that we think are cool. We really want to work with you to identify what your needs are locally across the state so that we can help address those. And then that third piece is to get that information to you timely. And in case you haven't seen, this is our on-farm research report. We want to release it the first week of January every year. This is the 2018 edition. It's available in the back of the room if you have not gotten a copy yet. We would like for you to pick one up. It looks like Kent's actually going to pass some around the room. So if you don't have one yet, throw your hand up as he comes by and we'll get one to you. And so this report highlights all of the field scale trials that were conducted around the state in 2018. It's not on here. I've got a slide in a minute, I think. There were 95 trials that were published in the 2018 report. We had 45 trials in the 2017 report. So you can download the 2017 report online and get your copy of this one today. And in a minute, I'm going to walk through what these trial reports look like. I wanted to use an example of how this sort of information could be used for a decision-making process, maybe for you. So I want to talk quickly about the soybean seeding rate trial. So this is one we've had a standardized protocol for the whole state for the last 2 years. There were 20 soybean seeding rate sites in 2018, and there were 13 conducted in 2017. So that gives us a pretty good range of trials. Those are pretty well distributed from northwest Ohio down to southwest Ohio, a handful on the eastern half of the state. But what we were able to do is those target seeding rates ranged everywhere from 50,000 seeds per acre, which sounds closer to a crazy corn seeding rate than it does to a crazy soybean seeding rate, right? But we've gone all the way down to 50,000 at one location and then all the way up to 240,000 seeds per acre. So we're seeing a wide range of seeding rates across the state. And one thing, we do like to try to report as much information as possible to help you understand what the results are and why we're seeing them. And one of those critical pieces of information for soybean seeding rate especially is what that stand is. We know that your target seeding rate, well, actually, Ohio State's recommendation, in case you aren't aware, is actually based off of the number of plants per acre at harvest to maximize yield. And so you have to calculate backwards and take into account what your germination is, what you think your survival is going to be, to actually make your seeding rate decision. And so what your stand is a critical piece of that. So we report for each individual location what the stand counts are for those different plots. And we see that in 2018, across the whole state, we had an average of 83% emergence, which for soybean is pretty standard. But those individual locations range anywhere from 60% up to 92%. So I think this information is helpful because that piece might be the most critical information for making a seeding rate decision in soybean, in my opinion. And in 2017, we had a slightly better growing season for beans, and that's reflected especially in those stand counts, where our average was a little higher and our range was a little tighter. And the reason that we think seeding rate is so interesting is demonstrated in this picture. It might be hard to see, but this is from one of our 2017 trials. Sorry, I get to talking fast and I stutter all over. And you can see that the soybean here planted at our highest seeding rate, which was about 180,000 seeds per acre, has a much different plant structure than the one on the far right in that picture, which was planted at 80,000 seeds per acre. You can no, and I'll get to that in just a brief second. So you can see those structural difference of that plant, and that's why it is interesting to look at what those plants are capable of doing at lower seeding rates. So this is the results from the 2018 trials across the state. And you can see this is a relative yield chart. So everything is normalized to the highest yielding treatment. If you listen to Bob's talk, the treatment is each individual seeding rate. So I take the highest yielding one for each location, and we call that maximum yield potential for that field for that year. And then we normalize everything to that. So the highest yielding plot is going to be up on the top of that chart, sitting on that one line. And you can get an estimate of what your potential yield loss is by changing these different management practices, in this case, seeding rate. So I'm going to throw up a line here at 90%. So anything that falls above that line was within 10% of our top yielding treatment in that plot. So if you want to think about soybean seeding rate as a risk-based decision, you can sit here and say, well, how many times out of 10 will I lose more than 90% yield, or lose yield? And so what we saw looking across the state in 2018, across all of those locations, we had 90 different seeding rate treatments, and only 6 of those did we lose more than 10% yield. So looking at the state average in Ohio of 50 bushel, only 6 times did any of these treatments yield more than 5 bushel below our top yielding plot. If you're a little less risk adverse and 2.5 bushel is more comfortable to you, in 2018 we only had 13 treatments that fell below 2.5 bushel of the top yielding treatment. So what we see here is that there's quite a bit of wiggle room in these seeding rates with our soybeans, and we saw very similar results in 2017. One of the things that we heard from you is that yield is pretty cool, and we like to see yield results, but economics, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? So for 2018, we added an economic an economic calculator to our seeding rate trials. And so all of these values are based off of the Ohio State Extension budgets developed by Barry Ward. If you don't like those numbers or you want to play with your own, the link on this slide right here at the bottom, go.osu.edu/econ calendar, takes you to an Excel sheet that you can download and plug in your own numbers. But for this example, we're using the cost of seed per thousand seeds of 42, almost 43 cents. Oh, I keep forgetting I can't use the pointer on the TV. So that's there. I've got seeding rates up there ranging from 80,000 seeds per acre up to 240, because I think that pretty well captures. And the first thing I want to show is if we set the yield to our state average of 50 bushel per acre, and let's just look at 200,000 seeds per acre. How many of you are seeding somewhere around 180, 200,000 seeds per acre as your farm average? There were a couple hands. So this allows us to look, and at that set seed price of 43 cents per thousand seed and a and the yield of 50 bushel per acre, we're netting a return above that seed cost of about $345 per acre. So that's pretty standard, right? So if we think back to that graph and we think about that 5%, so 13 times out of 90, we lost 2.5 bushel or more. So if we think about that worst case scenario, and we look at with that same seed cost, but our yield decreased down to 47.5 bushel per acre, we could cut back on our seeding rate to 120,000 seeds per acre, which I'm going to jump back here real quick. So if we look at this chart where 120 falls, the only time where we actually fell below that 5 bushel, and I don't have a line, there's a handful that are under the 2.5, but the only time we fell below that 5 bushel was at a location where we had 60% emergence. That was our location with 60% emergence. So I think that's a pretty fair level of risk to take on. So if we drop our seeding rate down to that 120 and we lose that 2.5 bushel, we're still netting $357 per acre using that same seed cost with that reduced yield. Compared to that $345, does that sound like a pretty safe, a pretty good risk to take? Anybody in here brave enough to think about dropping that low? Maybe try out a seeding rate trial and see what it looks like on your farm. So I'm going to spend the last few minutes here walking through what the report looks like. So this is an example with the seeding rate trial. The first thing you can look for is in the top right corner. It's going to highlight what county that trial was conducted in. We know that there's a lot of variability across Ohio, so we also are reporting in this study information different information about management practices for that field. So we've got planting date and harvest date, which you can agree or disagree. I think those are pretty critical pieces of information when understanding what happened with yield. For our seeding rate trials, for all of our trials, but I think seeding rate's pretty interesting. You can see row spacing, you can see tillage practices. We go down here at the bottom, each field reports the soil type across that field and the distribution of each. So you can get an idea, maybe you have an oddball field that doesn't match up with most of the rest of your county. You might be able to find, by looking at soil types, a field where a trial was conducted similar to that. We also report the nearest weather station data for that trial location, both daily precipitation and GDD accumulation. And then there at the bottom, we've got a table that gives you the treatments. This is a seeding rate trial, so you can see there the emergence information, the moisture, yield, and then for these select trials, seeding rate and nitrogen, we have a return above whatever the variable we were looking at was. So in this case, return above seed. One very cool tool that I think is we've got a great crew up in Delaware County who's gone around and done some fun videos. So if you come across a barcode on one of the pages, you can scan that with the camera on your cell phone. And it'll take you to a video where you can hear from the farmer and the extension educator who conducted the trial about what they learned, why they got interested in on-farm research. And I think that's a really neat way to really dig into the trial from a different perspective than just reading the report yourself. And I was going to show a video, but I don't have time. But maybe at break we'll show a couple of them if you're interested. So where is eFields going in 2019 and beyond that? So I'm excited about the growth that we've seen over the first 2 years of the program. Like I said, in 2017, we had 45 trials in 14 counties. And then last year, we were over 95 trials in 25 counties. And I think we're already adding, as of now, several counties this coming year, and we're definitely interested in adding more partner farms and more trials. So eFields we have identified these 6 focus areas that we're trying to focus on. I think pretty much any research question you can think of, we can figure out how to fit it into one of these categories. So don't let this limit your creativity on things that you might be interested in learning about. But as I said earlier, we do have 3 protocols available on our website right now, the corn soybean seeding rate and the nitrogen rate. And that's our web address up there where you can find them and take a look. We're currently in the process of creating new protocols for 2019 based off of feedback from your peer farmers at some of our regional meetings this winter, and those are going to include fungicide trials for both corn and soybean, starter fertilizer, and some nutrient placement and like I think I've said a few times, we're definitely interested in hearing what matters to you and what you would like to see in these trials to help you make better decisions on your farm. The only real constraint we have, like Bob was saying just a little bit ago, in order to get good data, it is important that we replicate these trials and then randomize those. But we can help you through that process. Like you said, the hardest part is setting it up and then cleaning the data and analyzing it. And that's what we're here for, to help you work through those. And so I'm going to close here with how to get involved. Hopefully you stick around for the rest of the afternoon. We've got a great lineup of one of our partner farmers up next, and then several of our extension educators who are conducting research around this area. It's pretty simple. Get in touch with your local extension educator. And if you don't like working with your local extension educator, you can reach out to us directly at digitalag@osu.edu. And then if you're not quite willing to talk to an actual person about it yet, you can check out our website and dig around and see what the protocols look like, get an idea of what you would be getting yourself into before you jump in and volunteer.